Hello everyone, welcome to Loving Life conversation series, People Who Change the World. Today we have Neal Zuckerman, Senior Partner, Head of Global Media Practice at Boston Consulting Group. Welcome, Neal.
Thank you, Faye. Thanks for having me.
So you have been at BCG for more than 16 years.
Yes.
And before that, you were with the U.S. Army. If you were to look back on your life, what are some of the key events or milestones that shape who you are today?
It's a good question. There are, when you get to be 51, you have a lot of milestones, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of milestones along the way. I tend to think that the things you do when you're younger are more impactful than the things you do when you're older, just because they shape who you are, right? And so I went to West Point. I showed up at 17 years old. I'm not even old enough to vote, but I'm old enough to carry a gun, apparently. And so that's a very intense, they call it a leadership laboratory at West Point. It's an intense place, and that's probably a euphemism for what one experiences there. But those experiences then 6 years after that in the Army were pretty shaping for me. And that's both, one could say good or bad, better or worse, but they just are. And the amalgam of your different experiences make who you are. My wife bought me a birthday card once, and it's still sitting on my bookshelf at home, and it says, "You are the sum of a unique equation." And I think we all are. That's what makes, as they say, the world go round, but we are. And so whether it was the military, whether it was going to Harvard Business School, when I finished my service, whether it was my first real job at McKinsey, at a business school full-time, these are all shaping experiences you have. And you learn some lessons, and then sometimes the challenge, of course, is when you learn those lessons, you sometimes forget to keep learning as you get older. You heard the theory of fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And one of the things one hopes in life is you have a growth mindset. You're open to learning new things, hearing new perspectives. I think one of the challenges of that old line, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, comes from people as they have so many experiences, they start to say, I know how the world works, I got it, which is obviously not true because the world changes, people change, generations change. So that's, I think, hopefully a roundabout way of answering your question.
You are the sum of, what's the line again?
You are the sum of a unique equation. X squared divided by y to the third power, or whatever your equation is. Who you were, where you went to school, what your parents were like, all these things sum up to be who you are at this moment, who I am at this moment, who Omar is at that moment.
I love that because there are different factors that go
Absolutely.
into it, and depending on if you're polynomial or exponential, then it really shapes who you are.
You're taking it a little far, but yes, I agree.
Yes.
I agree.
So you were with U.S. Army for 6 years, and
after I went to West Point, so a total of 10 years.
A total of 10 years, and you were a helicopter pilot there.
Yes.
I went to this education program at Stanford. It's about VC, and one of the lessons was about U.S. Army. How do you assess whether a pilot is good or not? And it turned out the series was a pilot would see a situation, assess it really quickly, and then try to do a solution experiment, and then go to observation model really quickly, so that a good pilot will assess the situation, make some changes, and not attach to the original hypothesis or assumption. I'm wondering, what are the key lessons you have learned within your decade-long career with the Army, and what are the lessons that you are still applying to your daily work with BCG?
I think it's a great question. I wouldn't say my pilot years were necessarily lessons learned for leadership or working with management. I would tell you that when you're a pilot, and I was not the pilot you think about may be a jet aircraft. It's going 600 miles an hour, and there's you're up in the clouds. I flew helicopters, and they were going 120 miles an hour, and you're 20 feet above the trees. So it's a very different experience. So it's actually low and slow, they used to say. But I think you become very attentive to detail. I'd say that's generally a rule for most people in the military, is you become very attentive to minute details. And that is a wonderful lesson when you're a junior officer in the military. Is that uniform correct? Are we going to be able to go the right way? Did you bring the right equipment? That's a great lesson. And it's actually a really good lesson when you're a junior project manager. It's a great lesson if you're an investment banker, analyst, and you have to check the numbers. Fantastic lesson. Terrible activity if you're a senior person. Because if you focus on this, you miss that. And so I'd say to you that there are different things one learns, again, early in their career. So one can be attached to detail. And in fact, as they say with the Peter principle, the things, you may get promoted all the way up to your level of incompetence. And so people who want to break through from, let's call it individual contributor junior levels of leadership, have to break away. And one of the things you have to unlearn in some ways, one of the many things you have to unlearn is attention to detail. You have to let go. You have to say, you can have the lighting however you want. You can say whatever you want to work. You can say, write the deck however you want to write it, but you have to focus on these three big messages. You can say, you can work with any clients you want, but we have to achieve these certain objectives, not just financial, but qualitative. And so lessons learned in the military, in college, or whatever they may be, sometimes you have to unlearn things to get to the next level.
So as you rise through the ranks, you actually have to unlearn, such as attention to details. Then what are the things you have to learn as you rise through the ranks?
Oh, what a good question. Well, look, I think there are things that transcend, of course, right? For me, it is surprisingly shocking how, whether the business world, the political world is particularly, probably less so in other factors of the economy or professions, ethics is something you don't want to unlearn. You don't want to unlearn having integrity. I think that is one of the great things that comes out of most military people. What they say is what they mean. My word is my bond. Those are fundamental truths. And you're surprised sometimes when you learn about a bankruptcy. We just saw this FTX bankruptcy happen. And you look at that and you wonder why you're wondering. Like, doesn't it seem like an unsavory character who says everything's fine when actually the company's going to bankruptcy, and then all of a sudden hundreds of millions of dollars of currency disappear? And you wonder why people are not tied to an ethical clause. The history of religion, its very purpose was created to actually inculcate ethics in our behavior so we can live in a society. Because if I can't trust you and you can't trust me, we can't live together. So it is surprising, however, that those are things you can't unlearn. What you do have to learn, however, sometimes is what is our goal. It's not to take a hill. It's not simply to do something minor or feed the troops or get through the day. It's bigger objectives, and how to figure out how you keep the big objective in the front, not the back, but the front of your mind while you're pursuing minor or micro topics to get there. And how you have to say to yourself, as long as the macro goals are met, we're doing okay. And secondly, which is the exact opposite of attention to detail, how do you intentionally turn down the noise? How do you not let individual hits knock you off? One of the trends, as you know, these days has been around mindfulness, right? Meditation. First attacked Silicon Valley, then it hit all the VCs, and then now almost every corporate American, every American company is offering some form of meditation. But what is meditation? What's mindfulness? Because you're not sitting there meditating about the problem. In fact, it's the opposite. If you've ever done mindfulness meditation, the purpose is to actually have you observe things and acknowledge that they will pass through. As the phrase says, this too shall pass. And so the notion that you have to actually say to yourself, that is a tough moment, it will pass. We will get through it, focusing on the wider objective. I think another thing that you have to unlearn or learn in a different way is the military teaches you fundamentally about accomplish the mission, mission. I was stationed in Korea after flight school, and across the Korean Air Force, we shared a base with the Korean Army and the Korean Air Force, and they had a sign saying, safety first, mission always. And so even mission was more important sometimes than safety. And I think they got it backwards, to tell you the truth.
You mean in Korea?
I mean that sentence should have been the other way around. It should have been mission first, safety always. But my point is that you have to focus on the mission, yes, of course. And the mission is usually paramount to anything related to any individual person. In the business world, as you get more senior, in fact, you have to do both. You have to focus on the mission at the same time that the troops, if you will, the people working it, have a good experience. Doesn't mean they're always happy, doesn't mean they go home at 5 o'clock, but are they developing? Are they learning? Is it stimulating them? Are they having opportunities to present, to grow, to share, to get some pride in their work? That topic, that equally important topic of the mission, which in my world is the client service, with the team, the troops, which is in this case all the kids who work in this firm, all the people who work with me, they have to have a good experience. And that is something one has to learn that they don't teach you when you're a junior officer at Westmore. And they don't teach you, I don't think, at HBS.
So it's both to make the clients happy, to delight the client, and to make your troop, your team happy.
I don't know if it's happy, and we can have a whole conversation, given the name of your business, around the word happiness, because that's a very tough word, happiness. I think those who aspire to happiness and those who actually are happy have achieved a level of a state in life that I don't know how one does. It's a tough word, happiness. In fact, as you know, in the U.S. Constitution, it says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, not happiness. We're not guaranteed happiness. All we're guaranteed is the ability to go find it, however you define it. So that's an interesting word. But back to your point about the twin goals. Yes, you have to. I think delight may be almost a strong word with clients, but yeah, let's aspire for delighting. That's a good one. I think the team has to have a strong and good experience. I like spinach, I really do, and with a little salt. Spinach, it's great. But generally people think spinach is not the most delightful vegetable. But it's good for me, I enjoy having it, I actually even seek it out. Doesn't mean it's delightful. And there's lots of examples of that. No one goes on a roller coaster, a literal roller coaster, to be delighted. It's terrifying. Maybe your stomach hurts at some point, but they do it anyway. Why? Because it provides some stimulation of things that maybe someone needs. And the word happiness, generally they don't write like, this is a happy roller coaster. They use probably other adjectives. So I try to avoid the word happiness because I can't guarantee it for anybody, including myself.
Right. Then how do you define happiness?
Oh, I don't. I try to avoid that word.
You try to avoid that word. Okay, let's change another question. How do you define success?
Oh, that's a really, whose success?
The success of your life.
That's a great question. I think similar to our previous part of the conversation about different stages of your life, I think you find that you define success in different ways at different points. And everybody has different definitions. Some people focus on a monetary, I want to hit a certain number. Some a lofty, I want to be a title, a CEO, a president of some sort. Some want to be able to have some actual impact, like I want to change X, Y, and Z. For me, I think it's been in stages. If you ask me the question, how do you define where you are? I'd say I'm a work in progress. I think we all are. I mean, I'm 51. I'm probably going to live for another 50 years. I've got lots of different things I can and will do or hope to do. So I'm a work in progress. And ultimately, success is defined at different points, different places. So when I was more junior out of college or out of business school, for me it was good job, make some good money, learn some good skills. Then as I get more senior, it was where can I have more impact, where can I actually have a role of leadership and some input. As I got older, it was what can I do in my community, what can I do in my region, my country that I can be helpful, hearkening back to earlier service. And now I sit here saying, what I really want to make sure I do, which has been a through line, but it waxes and wanes in your ability to attend to it, is how's the family doing? Are they happy? Are we doing well? And you have all these balls in the air. You have the family ball and the career ball and the financial ball and the fitness ball, and you have all these things. Some are about you, some are about your family, some are about your community, some about your career. But there are all these different balls in the air, and you've probably heard this anecdote before. There's a period in your life where usually you're so frenetic with all of those balls, young kids, young job, you're doing this, you're doing that. There are times where you say, my only goal is to make sure none of those balls hit the ground. Imagining that, let's say the balls are all made of glass, right? And your hope is that the ball never drops.
Yes.
But it can get pretty close, right? So sometimes you're paying a lot of attention to this ball up here, but not this ball down here. And other times, that ball may switch in position. But at a minimum, if you have thrown the balls in the air in the first place, you want to make sure none of them crash.
That sounds like a busy life.
Sounds like a busy life.
There are many balls to juggle.
Look, there are people that say, and I'm sure at one point, the theoretical argument for retirement, when that was a concept, which some people still retire, but not nearly as many. My father is 79 years old, works as hard as he did when he was 29 years old. He runs an accounting firm. The guy works harder than I do. I've never seen anything like it. But the theory of retirement was, I'm going to have less balls in the air. I'm going to have a ball for playing tennis. I'm going to have a ball for, my uncle works in a soup kitchen a couple days a week to make himself feel involved in the community. I'm going to spend time with my family. And the 3 balls, that's enough. And maybe that's right. And that made a lot of sense when you lived only till 65, 70 years old. But I think longevity is in a lot of our futures for those our age and younger. And so I think you have to find ways to not retire, because you have to be involved. It's something, we talked about this last time. Kennedy said this in his speech at Vanderbilt. He says, you need to be a participant and not an observer. Whether you're a winner or a loser. And he was talking about elections, running for office. He says it's all about participation. And I tend to think that's sort of why we're all on this earth. I don't mean in an existential way, and I don't mean in a religious way. I mean, like, while we're all here, you might as well participate. That's right. Now, some may participate in a hedonistic way. Like, I just want to experience all this fun, entertainment, whether that be illicit or legal, but I want to experience. And that's experience. I tend to think of more in participation in more positive or uplifting ways and less selfish ways. That's who I am. But there are lots of ways of doing that. But ultimately, it's about participation, and usually that includes other people.
Yes, because when I saw the quote, whether winner or loser, you want to participate, I feel you are someone who participates always. That's one of the magic of getting things done in a really efficient, no matter where you are, no matter what goals you're defining at different stages of your life. What is your secret of moving through life with efficiency, with impact?
It's true. Let's not touch the impact one as much, because it's harder to define the outputs, but I can talk about the inputs a little bit. I do think I'm efficient. From how many steps does it take to get to that door, to what's the fastest way to get the garbage outside and so the garbage man can pick it up. I do think about efficiency. I think that's what makes us, those of us who have engineering backgrounds, everyone at West Point has to minor in engineering. You actually graduate with a bachelor's of science. If I had gone to a normal college, I would have gone a bachelor's of arts and history. But everyone at West Point majors in whatever they want, but you have to have a bachelor's of science. So you are, the majority of your classes you're taking are in math and science and engineering. And so I think I carry that as sort of a spirit of me intellectually, which is, how do you make things work? It's what makes me somewhat good at cost work we do with our clients.
Cost work.
Cost, how to make something more efficient, right? Like, how do you, instead of doing something for $1 per activity, can we do it for 50 cents? Can we do it for 25 cents? I believe efficiency has value because it unlocks freedom to do a lot of other things. In one's personal life, as a very simple and daily task, I'm constantly working through to-do lists. What do I have to do? And I'm always organizing which things matter. Constant prioritization is at the heart of it. You have to say to yourself, what do I want to accomplish? Where do I want to be? And how many things can I handle? I'd say a second component of that ability to be efficient is you have to just take on more than you think you can.
You have to take on more than you think you can.
You have to take on more than you think you can, because you probably can do more than you think you can. And sort of back to the example of the soup kitchen and the tennis, I think my uncle could probably take on more. My father probably can't take on more, the number of hours he works, but the reality is that we can always do a little bit more. And I think one can be pleasantly surprised that the more they take on, they can handle it. Now, are they spending enough time on the things that matter? So an argument against what I just said would be, well, if you take on too many things, are you spread too thin? Are you not able to spend the time on it? And that's true. I was just talking to my assistant about this an hour ago. We were saying how, I'm always having lunch, dinners, and meetings with people, and if I left my calendar more open, maybe there'd be some serendipity. Maybe when the task that wasn't planned shows up, I'd have more freedom. And that's true. That's totally true on a day-to-day basis. Every one day that something, like the example I gave from mindfulness, something will come in to try and knock the day around. A gust of wind, figuratively, occurs and you didn't plan for it. So that's true. When you are overscheduled and overbooked intentionally, the system doesn't have a lot of flexibility, right? That was actually one of the problems at a macro level, what happened with COVID. Our supply chains around the world were always built, not always, but were built to be just in time, right? Those Japanese Toyota quality management was all about how do you make the system as efficient as possible, which meant we minimize how much inventory is in the system. We keep working capital down. We keep inventory down. But when supply chains are disrupted and people can't have to wear masks and they can't be around each other, and the supply is sitting in China of masks and we can't get them in the United States, that's a problem. So the contrary to this argument about efficiency and doing more than you can is, well, it can break, and that's totally true. That's the downside. The upside is you actually do more things than you would have done otherwise. And maybe if you say yes more than you say no, maybe you actually can open your horizons. And maybe by doing more intentionally, you're not waiting as much. You're being more proactive, which I think is one of my traits as well, being proactive, seeking out the opportunities. We talk a lot whether you're in sales or consulting, and many efforts, we say you strike out 100% of the time that you don't bat, right? You lose 100% of the opportunities you don't try for, and that's true. One of the worst things to be able to say is that you had regrets. No one wants to have regrets. Oh, I should have tried this. I should have tried that. I should have applied for that job. I should have tried that to get on that board. I should have. Well, what the reality is, you should always try, especially since they say that the one way of framing one's head around these issues is, and a slightly morbid idea, is the deathbed theory, which is you don't want to lie in your deathbed and say, I should have done this.
You don't want to have regrets in life. You
don't. Now, you may say, well, I chose not to do this because of these other things in my life required more attention. I should have gone for the job, but my family wanted to stay in New York. Or I should have gone for that other position, but I really wanted to be somewhere else. But those are choices. If you get to actively make the choice, that's great. But don't let the choice happen to you. You want to proactively make those choices for yourself.
Proactively making choices. So I could imagine your calendar is filled with events.
Whose isn't?
Right, whose isn't? Then how do you pick and choose? How do you decide? Say 10 interviews want to come to you. How do you pick and choose what to do, what not to do?
Yeah, look, I think we all make choices about what sounds interesting at the moment and where we think we want to go. It's probably hard for me to say to you A versus B in any moment. But you can, over time, just like when you're reviewing someone's portfolio of work, an artist, a writer, where's the direction of travel? Where's this guy going? Where's this person taking his work, his mind, his life? And so I think it's hard to say, oh, I want to go to that versus that, because there's obvious choices. Does it work for the calendar? Is that more interesting? Have I not spent enough time with this person, so maybe I'll not see that person because I need to go see this person? Again, back to the balls in the air. You want to just sometimes make sure you're a quarter of an inch right above the ground. But there are moments, and for me, I find the couple weeks between around Christmas time before New Year's, good time to reflect on, and did I make good use of the year? And a year is probably not even a fair amount of time, but we all require some reflection at some point, and it's as good a time as any when you're slowing down at work a little bit and more time with the family, and those conversations with oneself about how am I doing the right things are important, and we all must do it. To the title of your own thing, Loving Life. I mean, how do you know you're loving life if you haven't stopped to say, is this the right thing I'm doing? Is it worth it? Am I working too hard, or am I not working hard enough? Or am I not working on the right things to begin with?
Yeah, is it worth it? It's a great question, because these days I don't ask if this is easy or hard. I always ask, is it worth it? So you mentioned about reflection, mindfulness. So it's a constant optimization, constant reflection, and prioritization.
Yes.
So did you make good use of your year? We're at the end of the year.
Oh, it's a great question. You know, I think I did okay. I'm a pretty tough grader on myself and therefore on others. Although that's, back to my earlier point, that's part of the other part of maturity, of different things at different levels. Probably better to be an easy grader. The more senior you get, the older you get, because the benefits of motivation outweigh the benefits necessarily of correction. When I was in college, probably in the 70s, a book was written called The 1 Minute Manager. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
The 1 Minute Manager.
1 Minute Manager. And the theory was it was by Ken Blanchard, I think it was the man's name, maybe not. But the book is called The 1 Minute Manager. And it was the essence of efficiency. You'd give 1 minute of correction and 1 minute of praise. You'd say, the meeting would end in 2 seconds, you'd say, okay, you know what? Let me tell you, you did this great, this is great, 1 minute, 1 minute. And then I'd say, but you need to work on this. Okay, good, we're done. And you're on the next thing. Now, that is perfect advice for an efficient management approach. But what it completely lacks in its application is any acknowledgement about the person who you're giving the feedback to. That person may be in a terrible state. Maybe they're euphoric after the meeting. Maybe they did a terrible job and they're despondent. Maybe they're just on to their next thing. And I'm the manager. I'm going to give him his 1 minute of praise and 1 minute of correction, and then I can move on. But what about the person? And I think that's the kind of thinking that you can get lost. And look, I can get lost too in it. But you can really get lost in what is efficient for you may not necessarily be efficient for the other person.
So which one is more important? When you talk to a person, when you give feedback, do you think the listener is more important?
I think one has to think that way over time, especially if you want to actually have your words have impact. Because the goal should not be to make the input, right? I did it, I gave him the feedback, check. Next thing on the to-do list. The goal probably should be, I want to make this person better. I want this person to know what to do next. I want this person to be an important member of the team and an increasingly more important, valuable member of the team. So if the goal is the latter, not the former, then one needs to think about, how will that person receive the feedback? Is this the right venue? Should we wait a few weeks? Should we do it in a more quiet setting? And so that's the kind of, and I'm not suggesting The 1 Minute Manager was a great book, but it was a very popular book. It was an enormously popular book. Another similar historic management theory was called the monkey on the back. I don't know if you've ever heard of this.
The monkey on the back.
Monkey on the back. The goal of management was to get the monkey off your back and onto someone else's. Now, who's the monkey? What's the monkey? The monkey is the task, the responsibility. That was a very classic thing I learned as a young guy at West Point and a young officer. Got a to-do list? All right, delegate this one, delegate that one, delegate. I've done delegating, done anything to do. But the problem with that theory, and I think anyone who learned those techniques has to struggle with it, because even if I give you the monkey, in this case the responsibility. Somehow I remember it was a 1974, don't ask me why that's the year, 1974 Harvard Business Review article. You guys can go look it up later, but I believe this article was in 1974. And the theory was that, yes, you get the responsibility of the manager onto a subordinate, and he or she goes and does the work. Great. But you, as the manager, don't actually get to abdicate responsibility. Even if I gave you the task, go do this, get it done by this date, come back to me when it's done, you still have responsibility. You still have to make sure. So even if I gave you the monkey, I still kind of have the monkey too. So now we both have the monkey. And ultimately, a good leader, I think, has to ensure that they both do it. And if I give you the monkey and you can't handle it, or you don't understand what to do with it, it is not your responsibility, it's my responsibility. I shouldn't have given it to you in the first place. It's jointly our responsibility. So that's another example of a lesson to unlearn.
Maybe you should have given me something not a monkey to fit the person with the task.
Well said. Well said. A dog, a cute little poodle, maybe.
Right, right. I can see why you're a popular senior partner, because you really care about your team and your client, because when you're speaking with other people, you really think from their perspective.
Well, I didn't say I do that. I said it's what one should do.
Right, the pursuit.
And I don't know who you told that was popular. That's very nice. I don't know if that's true either, but it's nice of you to say.
You're very humble. So we talk about how you view the world, and you have a specific set of values that you really care about. You stand for, you advocate for journalism, whether on a local or national level. You also serve your community and the country. What are some of the key values to share, and why?
Yeah, great question. The why are harder, because I think that goes back to your original question about how'd you grow up and more original or origin stories. I think I'd say the ultimate value I hold is truth. It happens to also have been one of the first ad campaigns the New York Times ever did, which is an extraordinary journalistic product in this country, around the world for that matter. But truth is pretty important to me, and truth in the macro sense, like we as a country should stand for truth and justice in the American way, as Superman said in the 1930s. He's obviously not a real person, but that was the tagline that Superman had. But I believe truth matters. I believe saying what you mean matters. I think what is real and factual matters. Without it, we don't have anything to stand on. Even when you read a great piece of fiction, right? So all the characters are made up necessarily and potentially. It has to speak to a truth about human nature. That's what makes great literature, is it speaks to a truth. Maybe a dark truth, but it's true. And that is absolutely the case when we're talking to our clients. That's absolutely the case when I'm talking to my kids. I believe in truth. Now, I can be accused of being maybe too truthful at times, right? Right. And some of us have to learn that how do you deliver truth in a way where, back to the earlier point, someone can receive the truth. But being honest is important. Ethics we talked a bit about. I truly believe in giving what I say I'm going to give, a dollar's worth of work for a dollar's pay. I told you another line that I use a lot. It's a Talmudic phrase, a Jewish phrase. When they say when a man goes up to heaven and they evaluate him and how he did, and they say, were you honest in your weights and measures? Were you honest in your weights and measures? Now that's a phrase that basically means if you're a merchant, weights and measures. If you weighed out a pound of sugar, was it a pound of sugar? It wasn't 0.99 pounds of sugar. It was a pound of sugar. You honestly portrayed what your goods are. You honestly state what you know. It doesn't mean we don't want to sell things in the sense of selling as in salesmanship, prettying up something that may not be as pretty as it is. That's not necessarily a lack of truth. There may be some positioning. I think we all position things and tell stories. But if you can't rely upon what people are saying, if you can't fundamentally hang your hat on the truth of what someone's abiding by, you see the degradation of individual relationships, you see the collapses of society, and you see what's even happened in this country in the last several years. One of the fundamental truths of democracy is that they're pretty fragile. And I forget how many years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, a book comes out called How Democracies Die. How Democracies Die. And one of the three most basic ways democracies die, and every authoritarian leader, to include Donald Trump, had tried this, which is you get rid of the free press. You undermine the free press, you restrict it, you take it away, you make it a state-run news organization, you take away the ability for the public to know what really is going on. And that is why I'm a big fan of journalism, particularly at the local level, because if you don't have truth tellers out there, in the media business they call it watchdog journalism. Someone's got to watch the powerful. And if you don't have that element, there's a chance to really get lost. Doesn't mean we're not going to, back to your questions earlier about happiness, you can be happy in a authoritarian society, I guess. There's probably some happy people, probably the wealthier people, probably the people that are related to those in power. But if there's not truth as an underlying societal belief, you're going to have a harder time having a better and successful society. And so I personally believe strongly that your word is your bond, that what you say is what you mean. Again, you have to say it in the right way, which I'm always learning. I'm always trying to work on that, because I can say something too strong or too emphatically. But that's something that's fundamental to me.
Your words are your bonds.
Yeah, they should be. Because otherwise, what are we then? Then we're just all positioning. Then we're posturing. We're telling each other stories. And then what do we rely upon? That's an unpleasant place to be.
And you mentioned about journalism. Truth should be the fundamental of journalism. You're telling the truth.
Yeah.
And then recently I saw you had a LinkedIn post on Twitter who after Elon Musk took over, he's thinking about charging, I think it's $799 per month, and then it's launching November 29th. You stand behind it. What are the reasons that you think this is the right idea?
I think I stand behind it. It's probably a strong word. I don't know Elon Musk. I've never worked with Twitter. Right. I use it like hundreds of millions of people use it. My point there was not really a truth point. My point there was really a business choice point, which is the following. I think that it is really hard to make organizations change. It is really hard for organizations that are successful building a product to build a second successful product. They're good at A, they may not be good at B. Often we find it takes singular leaders who have great risk tolerance, usually entrepreneurs, I'm not one, to launch multiple successful products, whether that was Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. And so when they're the singular owner, he's the sole shareholder of Twitter, right? He owns it, right? It's not a public good, it's his good. He owns it. And if he says, I want to figure out how to monetize my own asset, well, you know what? That's his choice to monetize that asset, which then leads to a second belief I have about media. The thing worth reading is the thing worth paying for. Now, I believe that's a very loose quote of Mr. Rupert Murdoch, which is, so I'm surprised that, from a political standpoint, I would never quote him, but from a business standpoint, pretty good guy to copy, pretty successful entrepreneur after decades and decades of building and selling and then rebuilding businesses over and over again. And this fundamental belief he showed with the Wall Street Journal years ago, and since then with his own products, is a truism. If someone wants something, if a consumer thinks this thing has value, that he or she would not at the same point put down their own money to have it, I think it leads to a disconnect. One can ask themselves, then, if you value it so much, why wouldn't you pay for it? Now, you can say, of course, that, well, the company could monetize the asset elsewhere. Google has hundreds and hundreds of products that are free, from the mail product to Google Maps, over and over again. I'm sure 10% of your digital productivity comes from using Google products, right? And they're phenomenal products in many regards. They are not monetized by you paying for them directly. With the exception of my family's case, I'm paying, I think, $10 a month for the terabyte of storage for my photographs that now sit somewhere in the Google Cloud somewhere. So, okay, that's one. But there are another 20 products I may use that I don't pay for. Should I be willing to pay for them? Probably. And if I looked at them and someone said, would you pay $1 for it? And I said, maybe not. Do I really value it? Now, it's okay. They monetize it through search. They monetize through advertising. There's lots of ways the corporation finds ways. Similarly with Amazon Prime Video. Okay, I don't directly pay for it. I pay for Prime, and I do that for the free shipping, and I get the video. If Amazon came to me and said, okay, you have to pay for the video service now, and if I didn't really like what I was watching, I didn't think it was worth it, am I making a commentary on my value of Amazon Video? Yeah, I think I am. So to answer your question, I think if people value what Twitter does, and they value that check mark, and he owns the company all and completely and outright, and it's a private for-profit company, then you know what? He should be allowed to do it. That was my point. and that's people can have different views. Oh, it's a social good. Well, that's true. It does seem to have a lot of social good to it, and there's not a lot of alternatives to it, which makes it even more dear to people. Does he have responsibilities for keeping it clean and a safe place to communicate? Yes. Should he open up those techniques he's using? Probably. It'd be nice to have some board of thoughtful people. But you know what? Lots of other social media companies have had boards of outsiders, and it has not proven the way to keep a clean and an above board moderation. And lots of things sneak in all the time. So I think my sense is that Musk gets a lot of attention because he's an incredibly successful person, somewhat polarizing, and very free with his thoughts. And that has gotten him in trouble a number of times, to include with the Securities and Exchange Commission, with things he was not allowed to say or tweet about stock prices. But the facts are that whether PayPal, whether Tesla, whether SpaceX, the Boring Company, I mean, the things this guy has envisioned and is marrying thought to action are unbelievable. No comparison on the history of the planet in terms of business, and he deserves to have a little bit of space to try and develop what he does with his business a few weeks after owning it.
Yeah, because it's his business. He can do, and whether he does it this way or that way, it really depends on his values and
right. And look, this is a mostly free market, so he could. You see this in Twitter all the time. I'm leaving. I'm not going to be here. What should I go to this other platform? And I don't know what the data says about people actually departing the service, but the reality is the market will bear. And that doesn't mean there are not, whether regulatory powers that should mind it, that there are issues with how he is curating who goes and comes. And again, I don't think he should be the chief curator. That's probably not a good and smart role for a CEO. But it is his company ultimately.
Right. You can keep complaining, but it's going to cost $8 a month. I want to end with something more personal. So you have two daughters who are 16 and 20. How do you balance it all, integrate it all? You have a big job, busy life, and you have a family to care about.
Yeah, it's funny. My older daughter, her name is Madeline. Her birthday is on July 16th, which doesn't really matter for the purpose of this question. But Madeline calls. I'm the chair of my town's planning board. That's land use. Whether you can build a house, a business, whatever. And for several years in a row, for whatever reason, the planning board meeting, which is on the third Thursday of the month at 7:30, has been, I think, for 3 years in a row, was on on her birthday. It was just happened that July 16th was this third Thursday of the month. So she calls the planning board meeting Madeline's birthday meetings, because I'm like, I gotta go to the meeting. I'm sorry, like I'll go to dinner before, but I gotta go. Like I said, I'm gonna go. My word is my bond. I have obligations. This is a really important meeting tonight. But I think how you balance it is you make sure to put them as much as you can front and center, be as transparent about what else you've got to do, and on occasion surprise/delight them with something that says like, I'm here. So whether we go to the Knicks games or we go on vacation a lot, but I hope they would say, and they're not going to walk through the door right now, are they? That's a surprise. You didn't call my. Right, they're not here, right? You're gonna jump. Okay, good. Omar, you think that was funny too? Good. All right. So, but they're not here. So, but I hope they'd both say, our dad's as present as one can imagine, and he cares a lot about us, and he's there. But he also missed my birthday 3 years in a row to go to the planning board meeting. But I think they'd say it's all about being thoughtful about what you can do, keeping those balls wherever they are. Because sometimes when the kids were younger and I was working harder, sometimes they were the ball that was closest to the ground. As they've gotten older and I've gotten more senior, their ball is a little higher, and maybe some other things are lower down.
Wow. I wish I had planned for your daughters to be here now.
That's okay.
All right, final question.
Yes,
you talk about the deathbed theory. If we were on our deathbed, and what would you have done for your entire life? You said, another 50 years, you will feel I've had a good life.
Oh, it's a very hard question, Faye. I'll probably answer that better when I'm 100. I'll let you know the answer. But I'll send it back in time. Maybe we'll have a time machine by then. I can send it back to you. Okay?
Yes, that
Thanks.
sounds good.
Very good. Loving life. Thanks for keeping up the work. It's a great topic and a great series. So thanks, Faye.
Thank you so much, Neal.
All right. Oh, all right. That was fun.
Thank you. Now
right.
you have to give me the 1 minute feedback.